You are living in the most dangerous time in American history.
We won't take a single back step.
Former professional basketball player is now the Republican Party's choice.
Can you imagine Royce White, the U.S. Senate?
White won the endorsement on May 18th with 67% of the vote.
There's nothing that guarantees we win, but I guarantee you if we lose, we will die. Welcome back to Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement. Help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And this is episode 289. Today is Monday, November the 3rd, year of our Lord, 2025. Day of the Democrats. Right here today, Monday morning. The midterm of the midterm, I like to call it. Right here before the 2026 11, we have these 25 elections happening around the country. Probably most intensely watched couple of mayor races in recent history. New York City, always a big mayor's race because it's the world's financial capital, America's largest city, and dark horse in political interest, as it has been many times of late. Minnesota elections, one being the mayor's race here in the city of Minneapolis, with Omar Fateh making headlines there against Jacob Fry. And tomorrow we'll know the outcome of that mayor's race. But I want to talk about Mamdani today. Day of Mamdani, we should call it. And right here I'm bringing up the Poly Market and to look and see Zoran Mamdani, margin of victory. We'll see here. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he wins. I don't know, but I know it's a herald of dangerous times ahead of us if an admitted communist becomes the mayor of the world's financial capital. It's just a bad sign. It's a bad sign of things to come. It's a bad sign that the people of New York City really understand the value of New York City, the value and role of their position in our society, in American society, but really in global society, as dangerous as that is to even say. I don't quite understand it. Honestly, one day it'll have to be studied if we make it that far and there's even human history or record still at that point. But it's scary. It's a scary time. Also, another Virginia's governor's race is on the docket as well, and Abigail, I think her name is Spanberger, if I'm not mistaken, Abigail Span and Winsome Earl Sears. Winsome Sears looking very close there at the end of the projections and polls within 2 points. Scary to see Barack Obama tell us all that we have to vote for black women when Kamala Harris ran for president, and then he endorses a blonde-haired liberal white woman when Winsome Sears is in the race for governor. It's just more rules for thee and not for me, and that's who these people are. I mean, it's become all but obvious. The one reason and we're going to have a quick out today. I don't want to spend too much time tomorrow. It'll be the mayor's race, and we're thinking about going live and covering these races around the country, but we'll see how that all shakes out. Tomorrow at 9 p.m., I will be airing an interview that I did today between myself and the great Chris Martinson of Peak Prosperity. He's been doing a really good job of trying to thoroughly investigate the Charlie Kirk assassination. He has some interesting information that he wants to share. So I hope you guys enjoy the interview. And of course, the Charlie Kirk assassination, the trial that's on the way, people are and should be, rightfully so, interested in what took place that day and who's, responsible and needs to be held accountable for the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So we're going to have Chris Martinson on to talk a little bit about his theory around the assassination. We talked about some other things: China, energy, hemispheric defense, a great deal of things with the guy who is a PhD in economics and resource management. So that'll be tomorrow night. I wanted to talk about Mamdani again, a herald of terrible times ahead when a guy like Mamdani is even. I wouldn't even say he's the front runner. It's hard to tell here. I mean, he's tracking, and polls are fickle anyway, and even the poly market. That's why I didn't show it, because it's an indicator, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. And our elections aren't even secure, and they're certainly not secure in New York City. So it's very difficult to navigate how to talk about and analyze elections in this country, but certainly in New York City, certainly in the mayor's race. I mean, you're talking about a race that's confined to a place where the corruption is quite out of control, if you ask me. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens tomorrow night with the election, with the mayor's race there in New York City, with the mayor's race here in Minneapolis. I have a pretty good idea that the liberal elite are not ready to give over to a face card, a figurehead that's so radical in his disposition, like Omar Fateh. I think that'd be a little too revealing for the liberal elite, the liberal academic elite, the international corporatists, the globalists that live here in the great state of Minnesota and the greater Twin Cities area. I think that'd be a little too revealing for their taste. But stranger things have happened. I anticipate that Jacob Fry will retain and continue on. The incumbent will prevail, let's say, in the Minneapolis mayor's race. We'll see. We'll see. Very bad sign that the Republicans didn't even run a candidate. Now, I don't want to hear, oh, well, Minneapolis is lost. You lose 100% of the games that you don't play. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And we have to have that mentality about politics, or we'll get overrun. And right now in Minnesota, we're being overrun. But let me show you, again, this is so interesting. Not that it really shocks me, but it is somewhat shocking in the sense that, talk about revealing. This is a huge reveal. This is the headline of the day. And maybe, Bill Kristol is so self-absorbed and narcissistic that he did it just for the attention. But this is the Mises Institute here. And there are a number of publications that put it out, but I chose Mises because, hey, what the hell? Mises Institute here, post headline, and this was from October 31st, but I just came across it this morning. Bill Kristol endorses Zohran Mamdani for New York City mayor. And in the margin here in the notes, it's a quote from Bill Kristol. Says, "I think a lot of the younger Democrats are quite impressive. It's almost unbelievable." Now, let's see. The New Republic covered it as well. It's the neocon. Even Bill Kristol says he would vote for Zohran Mamdani for New York City mayor. The neocon says it would be pathetic for New York to go back to Andrew Cuomo. Even neocon Bill Kristol would rather have a Democratic socialist for mayor of New York City than Andrew Cuomo. And in a Wednesday interview with Claremont College's The Forum, Kristol, now the Bulwark's editor-at-large, stated that the idea of going back to Cuomo, who had previously served as New York Attorney General and governor, would be ridiculous. Kristol said he would probably vote for Mamdani in the general election if he lived in New York City, although he wouldn't have thought to rank him in the primary, but the bulk of his ire was for Cuomo and the establishment. The idea of going back to Cuomo is just, I think, ridiculous. I think if it had been the first round, I would have voted for someone else and maybe wouldn't have even ranked Mamdani and would have had other people who were more centrist, liberal types. I mean, it's horrifying. And of course, people will say, hey, Bill Kristol's lost all credibility. But in actuality, a lot of the people who come from this National Review, remember, never forget the cover there in 2016, I'm sorry. Never forget the cover in 2016 against Trump, right there on the front of the National Review, the house that William Buckley built. And Bill Kristol, I think his name was on the cover, in fact. If you go back and you look at that National Review cover, Bill Kristol's name is in the subtext. And just that entire National Review cohort is the informative fabric, the informative thread of thought in the conservative movement that still dominates much of our Republican establishment today. It's just a matter of fact. I mean, it's not an opinion. It's not a conjecture. And if I go here and I want to show you guys this as well, sorry to jump around, but here in the Minnesota Star Tribune, a gentleman by the name of Andy Brim, who used to be a staffer for Norm Coleman, Senator Norm Coleman, who got big publicity over the weekend from the Republican Jewish Coalition's event. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But this guy, Andy Brim, used to work for Norm Coleman, and the headline here, contributing columnists. Okay, these are op-ed pieces, more or less, but, he's a columnist that works for the Star Trib, and it says, Tim Pawlenty should reconsider and run for the United States Senate in 2026. Not only could the former Minnesota governor win, but he would bring much-needed dignity, class, and common sense to Washington. It's almost unbelievable. I don't know why my subscription's not loaded up here, but this is what the newspapers have come to, right? They got to try and force bundles and subscriptions on you. I get it, but come on, give me a break. Tim Pawlenty should run for United States Senate. And the entire article goes on to really say how, again, I'm unfit to be a candidate. I'm unfit for the United States Senate. And good old Tim Pawlenty, who is more or less the poster child for rhino establishment politics here in the state of Minnesota, would be perfect for the job. I didn't even know who Andy Brim was, to be honest, until I saw the article. Then I go to call around, ask about him, and unanimously, anybody who's even remotely MAGA or America First said the exact same thing, that he's an establishment piece of trash. Same school of thought. Norm Coleman, Tim Pawlenty, Rudy Boschwitz, Vin Weber. They all come from that National Review, Billy Kristol, Tom Klein. I think his name was that Tom Klein wing of the party, the Klein wing of the party. It just seems to never go away. It seems to never go away. Dying, but dying very slowly. And they're gonna do everything that they can to hang on to what little bit of credibility they have. Little bit of credibility they have. It's interesting. It really is. And we're in a dogfight for this party, for the Republican Party. We're in a dogfight to really have an America First and MAGA movement and agenda that isn't sandbagged by our own people over the next year and a half, a couple of years, the rest of President Trump's term. And when President Trump declares in 2028 and President Trump decides to run again in 2028, you will see just how much the establishment really, really feels, how they really detest and what they really feel about the MAGA movement. You're gonna find out. You're gonna find out. And like Chris and I talked about, and there are some things that I'm critical of. Like, again, this entire Republican Jewish coalition I thought was obnoxious. And I want to talk about that first here for a moment, because I really do get the sense that Israel is becoming, it's the entire Israel, Palestine, Middle East theater thing is becoming a huge rabbit hole, a dark, dark and deep rabbit hole on every side of the conversation. Like I think about Israel and Palestine, and I think about the entire conversation in quite simple terms. What's wrong with just America first? What's wrong with focusing on America for the time being, focusing on America for a while? What's wrong with prioritizing our own country and our own citizens? What's wrong with that? Why do they think that they can convince us of an ideological paradigm, dichotomy of jihadism or Zionism? And they think they can force it on us. The same way the Democrats and the liberals feel like they can force, transgenders or don't eat. Right now they're holding out the vote for the United States Senate to reopen the government and get people the SNAP benefits that they're so out of sorts about, and saying that it's destroying the country and starving millions and millions of people. Lady boys or eat, right? I mean, we're going to push the transgender and LGBTQ stuff back through. We're going to push all of the other radical things and policies back through the agenda. Try and ram them through the omnibus agenda. This bill, or people just aren't going to eat, and then we're going to blame the Republicans and say it's the Republicans' fault when you need a 60 vote majority. Everybody knows that. They don't even care. They're going to say it anyway. They're going to say this shutdown belongs to the Republicans. This shutdown is because of the Republicans. The Democrats are the ones that are voting against it. And this is why majorities in the United States Senate are so important. This is why majorities are important. Seats that we gave up, seats like the one here in Minnesota in 2024, when 4 of your sitting Republican Congress members refused to endorse me even after I had won the Republican nomination and was set to face off with Amy Klobuchar in the general election, one of the most radical and well-funded Democrats in the country, and you can just assume which side of the aisle she's voting on. And this is where politics becomes much, much darker and much more uncomfortable for the American public. But it's the same thing with Israel and Palestine in some sense. They're trying to force us to choose between jihadism and Zionism, and I just simply answer, how about neither? I mean, what's wrong with neither? Do I have to choose between crack or methamphetamine? Do I have to choose between cigarettes or a vape pen? How about I just choose neither? I say I don't want either one. We're good. We're good. We don't want either one. We're not rolling with either. It just seems like our culture politically is so polarized, and we are so brainwashed into political dichotomies in general that we can't even pull ourselves to just call it even, call it straight down the middle, call neutral. Well, we don't want to choose one or the other. Let you guys figure it out. You figure it out. You figure your shit out. It's kind of like, when you're a friend and maybe you're the third wheel on a Friday night. For whatever reason, I never agreed to be third wheel on any date nights in my life for this very reason. And we should keep our nose out of other people's business. And when you play third wheel, which we've done for many, many generations in this country, our entire foreign policy is sort of a big third wheel. But you're with your friends, a couple, you're playing the third wheel on a Friday night, and they get into a big argument. And they try to have you adjudicated. They try and have you, be the deciding vote. And what do most reasonable people tell? If you have any sacred honor, if you have any real integrity, which some people don't, and if I tend to say, men will usually try and refrain from getting involved in that argument, in that debate, in that domestic dispute. More times than not, women will most often take the side of other women. They won't refrain from getting involved. More times than not. That's my opinion on average. Tell me what you think. But if you have any sacred honor, any real integrity, you're going to say, that's your shit. Figure your shit out. Figure your shit out. Go talk about it. Go figure your shit out. I'm not getting involved. You're certainly not going to ruin the rest of my. I'll leave. You end up parting company with the couple. You end up saying, I'm not playing the third wheel. Maybe they got in a fight just to get rid of you. I don't know. But, go figure your own shit out. But some of these American thought leaders, people like Bill Kristol and the rest of that National Review neocon cohort, won't let us just, kind of be reasonable about the entire thing. And it just, I don't know. I don't know what this Christian Zionism thing is really all about. So I grew up in the Catholic Church, and in the Catholic Church, we didn't really, there was no real emphasis on Israel whatsoever. And I'm not saying that the Catholic Church and Israel aren't very closely aligned either geopolitically, but it was never a part of the Catholic tradition. So I'm not really familiar with it. And it kind of comes across as peculiar to me in many ways. It's like, and you see the response on social media. You can't, first of all, anybody you can't, there is nobody that America can't criticize. Americans can't criticize. There's nobody that an American journalist shouldn't question. There is no limits on the freedom of speech for American citizens. That's a principle. That's an axiomatic fundamental of American citizenship and American culture, our way of life. There is nobody we can't question. There is nobody who we can't criticize. There shouldn't be, especially for the America First, MAGA, conservative, Republican side of American politics. There shouldn't. I mean, that for us should be fundamental, especially after what's going on the last 4 years. But somehow we came out of this pandemic period where the censorship and the tyranny of the social media platforms and the entire sort of online, ether was censorship. Was, hey, we're going to tell you what you can and can't say. We'll tell you who the authoritative sources are. We'll tell you what the official narrative is, what the accepted mainstream narrative is. And we came out of that, and I thought we had our wits about us in terms of how dangerous censorship really is and how important the freedom of speech should be to us. And yet, when it comes to Israel, we kind of throw inhibition to the wind and we say, give us the censorship. Give us the cancel culture again. If Tucker Carlson wants to interview Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson can interview Nick Fuentes. I remember them saying the same thing when he interviewed Vladimir Putin. It's just like, he interviewed the guy from Iran. He's interviewing the other side. He's interviewing people who have a different narrative, who have a different story to tell. There are always two sides to a story. There are always multiple sides to a story. And I guarantee you, as much as big of a supporter as I've been of Israel and the Jews, and I've found myself many occasions, even in a debate with Mark Lamont Hill, defending the story and legitimacy of Israel while still being hypercritical of the Israeli lobby and the influence of people like AIPAC. And both things can be true. And it seems increasingly difficult to convince people that two things can be true. Not always two things can be true. And some things should take precedent, no doubt. But in this case, I really believe two things can be true. There is a narrative that says, and I want to talk about this for a moment, but there is a narrative that says, and it's completely relevant to it's kind of funny, apropos to the Mamdani Bill Kristol alliance, opposition, controlled opposition. It's kind of, it's kind of scary in its relevance to what we're talking about with those two. But I do believe that there's a narrative about the illegitimacy of Israel that is intended to delegitimize America. I really do believe that. I think a lot of your people on the left who say free Palestine and they're all anti-Israel. I don't buy for 1 second that they're supportive of the Palestinians and the Palestinians' cause out of altruism. And I say that as a black man because I don't think when they wave Black Lives Matter flags that they're really doing it for black people either. I think it's political in its nature. I think it's part of a political agenda. I think it's part of political propaganda in order to, build a constituency, a reliable voter base, a reliable block of voters based on identity. Free Palestine, the Palestinians and black people and the LGBTQ and women, they all suffer from the same disease. They are easily susceptible. They are easily, tricked into identity politics. So I'm not buying, and I think a lot of these people on the left, a lot of your ultra liberal, progressive, leftist, sort of Democrat socialists like Mamdani are only interested in Palestine as a way to delegitimize America. And their claim is that, and they say it, they come right out and say it, it's not even really so much a theory of the case, more so than it is an observation of what they say, that all land is conquered land. All land that's stolen land can't be legitimate land that you call a nation state. It can't have borders and effectively can't really have any governance. And there are a lot of people who make the case against the Constitution. The Democrats, they like to flip-flop. When they're not in power, they say we're trying to wreck the Constitution. When they are in power, they try and change the Constitution. We see it every single cycle. Every time the power changes hands, again, rules for thee, not for me. But their basic argument, their fundamental argument is any nation that is built upon stolen land is an illegitimate nation. And so if Israel is an illegitimate nation, then so too is America. And they do make that argument. They make the argument that Western civilization is, in effect, illegitimate because it's a remnant of colonialism, which is just a crazy thing to say. It really is. It's nonsensical. It's not rooted in any fundamental logic. It doesn't pass a sniff test. It doesn't stand up to any intellectual scrutiny whatsoever. First and foremost of which is pretty much all land, more or less, has been conquered throughout history. So one thing they're not making any more of, and that's land, and pretty much all of it has been discovered and has been claimed by one person or another. And in many cases throughout history, I would say most cases throughout history, there was some type of territorial dispute between two opposing groups of people when it comes to any one piece of land that we can observe in history. Certainly it's true of Europe. Not so much based on race in Europe, or you could say it was based on race because at one point in Europe, your nationality was more important than your race. And the great kingdoms of the European, pre-Enlightenment Europe, even some cases in post-Enlightenment Europe, all the way up to the days of Napoleon, your national identity, your national identity was more important than your race. There wasn't really, there wasn't a race. You were from Prussia, you were, a Roman, you were Greek, you were, you were Phoenician, you were Scandinavian. So you were Spanish, you were French, you were Russian. There were all of you were Austrian. So, there were the entire take on identity in that regard is much different, or was much different then than it is today. And we have a very revisionist history about the way the world unfolded. That is completely intellectually dishonest. It is completely and utterly intellectually dishonest. All land has been conquered at some point in time. All land with any significance, any real historical significance. Very few places that had anything of value on it weren't fought over. Very few places. And we can go down to Africa. If you want to play the race game and talk about colonialism, we can go down to Africa and have to acknowledge that many wars were fought in Africa before Europeans ever showed up to colonize it. Many wars were fought between tribes, maybe not entire nations or empires or nation states. In some cases, there were big wars between nation states and empires like the Mali Empire, but tribes, villages, little pockets of people fought wars over the land there in Africa and everywhere else around the world. There are wars of what they call indigenous people fighting against each other all throughout history. Here in America, for sure. They call it stolen land. It's conquered land. It really is. Native Americans were fighting each other for this land well before Europeans showed up. So this moral and ethical claim that any nation built on stolen land is an illegitimate nation is ridiculous. And it's ridiculous for America. It's ridiculous for Israel. It's ridiculous for any nation. And why are they so selective with their nations? China, no, I never hear them criticize China for being a nation built on stolen land. Look at their map. Mongolia, Tibet, East Turkestan. These places weren't a part of continental China. These places are only relatively recently considered China. And they were considered China by force, by approximation, by assimilation, by annexation in some sense. And nobody ever screams out, "Oh, the Chinese, they're tyrants, they're authoritarian, they're colonialists." In fact, if there's one example of a neo-colonial movement, it's what the CCP is doing all around the world. And I hear very few liberals or Democrats who have anything to say about it. Maybe it's because the CCP is a proto-communist political machine. Just maybe. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe they make the argument that the communists in China aren't really so communist. They're kind of capitalist, or there's some hybrid, or whatever they want to say. They're communist. It's Chinese Communist Party. You could say whatever you want. You could skin a cat 50 different ways, but at the end of the day, underneath the fur, it's still a cat. So again, this Israel-Palestine argument, I do think there is a narrative that's intended to delegitimize Israel so that those same people can delegitimize America. Now, that doesn't excuse or pacify the corruption or the intellectual dishonesty of the Israel lobby or AIPAC or the Zionist agenda. It doesn't excuse, it doesn't justify it. It's not a satisfiable scapegoat at all. Two things can be true. Yeah, there are people on the left, like Mamdani, who are absolutely full of shit, don't care anything about the Palestinians, really, and they just use Israel and Palestine as a conversational political proxy, an intellectual proxy to delegitimize America. You delegitimize Israel, you get to delegitimize America. Any nation built on stolen land isn't really a nation. It's not a legitimate nation. That's a ridiculous claim. That would mean there are no legitimate nations in the world for the most part. And part of me just kind of chuckles, unironically, the globalist agenda and the people who are the offspring of the globalist agenda, like George Soros, who want an open society with no borders, would make the claim that no nation is legitimate. I mean, you kind of see where the entire narrative comes from and where it's headed, what it's aimed at. But that doesn't mean that Israel is justified in their relentless insistence that anybody who has any criticism whatsoever is somehow a Jew hater. And I sat there and I watched Brandon Tatum, Officer Brandon Tatum, do one of the most obnoxious shillings of Israel at this Republican Jewish Coalition event I think I've seen anybody so far. I mean, he's going harder than Mark Levin, and it's just kind of like, what's your deal? What is your deal? How much are they paying you? I know Bibi Netanyahu was caught on tape saying that they're going to start paying influencers, $6,000-7,000 a pop for posts in support of Israel. But I thought that was incredibly damaging. And mind you, now the story of Israel is a very carefully curated story to begin with, and I'm talking just about Israel. Now, let's set Palestine to the side. I'm talking just about Israel. The story about Israel projects Israel as a geopolitical force or a geopolitical policy where Israel is monolithic and has some type of consensus amongst its people. That's not true. It's just completely misrepresentative of what's really happening in Israel. There is tons of political polarity and disagreement in Israel about the policies of Israel, about the political, the political sort of situation in Israel, but even the spiritual situation in Israel. And people tend to forget that there are Christians that live in Israel. There are Christians that call Israel home. There are Muslims that call Israel home, that live in Israel. And as far as the Jews go and Israelis go, there is serious contention about the theological and spiritual implications of the state of Israel, what it means to be Jewish. Even look at the One Israel movement. The One Israel movement is where, reportedly, there are a bunch of young Israelis who are deeply interested in Jesus. And the One Israel movement is at least, public facing, claiming that they believe Jesus is the Messiah of the Jews. It's very interesting that they never get much airtime. And maybe they're not a big movement, but they certainly show some huge numbers in their content engagement. And they make the claim that a lot of young Israelis are deeply interested in Jesus. And you never really hear or see that. Also, you never really see how many black Jews live there in Israel. And I think there are close to 2 million black Jews. And when I say black, I mean African Jews, more or less. I don't mean like American black Jews, although I would assume that there are some, but very few. There are plenty of African Jews that live from, Morocco, from Libya, from Ethiopia, namely from Ethiopia, from Algeria, from Iraq. Now you could say, well, they're Arab Jews, or okay, well, they're not European Jews. Let's say that they're not Jews that migrated back to Israel from Europe. And why is it when we see Israel represented in mainstream media, you rarely do you see a black Jew. Rarely do you see an African Sephardic Jew. Very rarely. What is that? Prove me wrong. Show me an example. Where are they? And if they exist, why aren't they the ones in America, for example, or even, just kind of on the internet, in media, representing the Zionist movement to the American public or to whoever? I mean, how did you get to Brandon Tatum? Where are the Jews from Morocco? Where are the Jews from Algeria? Where are the Jews from Ethiopia? Where are the Ethiopian Jews? Show me an Ethiopian Jew that has a proto-Zionist, and I'm not trying to make it about race. I'm really not. Well, all I'm saying is that there's a story in Israel that's not even being told. And I think the monopolization of the narrative around Israel is harmful to Israel. It's harmful to the Jews. The same way the narrative about the post-World War II Democrat liberal order and the managed decline of the West and all these other neoconservative, neoliberal ideas are detrimental to America, I think that the way that the narrative is being handled in Israel is detrimental to the Jews in Israel. I could take you all the way back to the very beginning, the first Roman-Jewish war, when the Second Temple was destroyed and the Jews revolted against the Roman Empire based on taxation for the most part, right? And out of that story, you get the secret assassin force called the Sicarii, which is where the word Sicario comes from for the Central American and Mexican hitmen. It originates right there in the first Roman and Jewish war, where many Jews took on a sort of silent assassin, and they would blend in the crowd, and they would kill Romans, or they would kill Roman soldiers, Roman officers, and then they would blend back into the crowd through under a hooded cloak. And the Jews were cast out. They lost that war. That war wasn't a short war. It was a pretty extensive war that, where the Jews revolted against the Roman Empire, and they pushed them pretty far. I mean, it wasn't a cakewalk for the Roman Empire to get that under control. And as a consequence, as a penalty, the Roman Empire renamed what was Israel and Judea, Syria, Palestina. So two things there. One, Rome obviously renamed the provinces out of spite, which is pretty clear. But also, don't be saying that there was no Palestine, because there was. Between 76 AD and 2025, or let's even say between 75 AD and 1941, 1941, 1947, when Israel is really constituted there in the region, how can you say that there was no Palestine? Of course there was. The Palestinian or the Palestine piece of the history and the identity goes all the way back to the earliest days of our Christian religion, and even before that. So why can't we just talk about it like that? Why do we have to be so obnoxious in our sort of partisanship about the issue? There was a Palestine there. There were Palestinian people there. There were Arabs there. There were Jews there, obviously. I'm sure there were plenty of people there that didn't believe in any God, because that tends to pop up no matter where you're at. And of course, there were early Christians there. And I only bring that up to say, that's one side of the story. Israel's a legitimate nation. I always say that Israel's a legitimate nation because they fought a war for it. And you can make an argument, oh, well, they wouldn't have won the war if it wasn't for America. Okay, you could say America wouldn't have won the Revolutionary War if it wasn't for the French. And I don't trust the fucking French further than I can throw them. It makes me sick that we still have this strange connection to the British Empire from before the Revolutionary War and the French from after the Revolutionary War. It's just the entire European sycophantic Westphalian Commonwealth culture is actually ruining this country, in my opinion. I don't like the nostalgia of it, but you could make that argument. You could say, well, the French, we wouldn't have won the war without the French. Okay. Israel wouldn't have won the war without America. They won it. They picked good allies. They won the war. If you win a war for a country, for a piece of land, you're a legitimate nation. We can say that Israel's a legitimate nation without saying that any and everything they do in defense of that legitimacy is justifiable. Because we don't even say it of our own country. We don't even say it about America. We never say that anything and everything America does in the said interest, national interest of America, is justifiable. We fight that tooth and nail to try and maintain some moral and ethical integrity, for our country. So we can criticize our country all day long. I can criticize President Trump. He does something I don't like. I speak on it. I'm in great support of him, obviously, and he's done a great job so far, in my opinion. His approval ratings are as low as they've ever been. Give me a break. I don't think people know what they want. In fact, I know people don't know what they want. I know you don't know what you want because people spend 60% of their time online browsing a bunch of shit that they either can't afford or they buy and they don't really use very much. I mean, it's just kind of a radical consumer culture. You can make a strong argument. People who are radical consumers, hyper materialists, radical materialists, they don't know what they want. They're never content. So, President Trump could turn water into wine. And I don't mean to be heretical when I say water into wine. You get what I'm saying. It's a joke, but he could turn water into wine and people still wouldn't be happy. And that's fine. We should criticize our government. We should criticize our president. We should demand the utmost transparency and follow through on the agenda that was set and the mandate that the people gave President Trump in 2024. There's no problem with that. But why is it then that I have people like Brandon Tatum and Mark Levin and Seth Dillon and all these what's his name, Josh Hammer even all these guys, they just kind of make the argument. I saw the other day Jillian Michaels. Who gives a fuck what Jillian Michaels thinks? Honestly, I couldn't give a flying fuck what Jillian Michaels thinks about any fucking thing. And it's really no disrespect to Jillian Michaels. It's just kind of like, who are these people and where did they come from and why are they considered so credible or significant in the court of public opinion? Tucker Carlson can interview whoever he wants. And I kind of have a bone to pick with Tucker Carlson because Tucker Carlson is going extremely red. I've talked about this before. He's going extremely red-pilled since the 2022 interview that he and I had when he was still on Fox News. And he was going red-pilled before that, in my opinion. But, it was a significant moment, and it got huge traction online. Since been forgotten when Tucker and I talked about my 2022 congressional race was trying to go against Ilhan Omar, derailed by the Republican establishment. But that's old news. But I've yet to go back on Tucker. And, hey, maybe he's busy. Maybe a Royce White interview's not really high up on the priority list. Maybe it's not interesting enough for Tucker. He's a very smart individual. But I still have the integrity to say, on principle alone, Tucker Carlson has the right to interview whoever he wants. He's an American journalist. He can have whoever he wants on the show. He should. He should have the broadest range of people on the show that he possibly can. The more extreme the views, the better. We want to hear how extreme things get. And you know what? After listening to the Nick Fuentes interview, and I've said this a number of times in recent months, people grow, people change. Nick Fuentes is no different. President Trump is no different. I'm no different. Look at Obama, Clinton, and look at Obama and Clinton and Schumer and Raskin and all these Democrats who sounded like America Firsters on their border policy, on their immigration policy just a couple decades back when it was advantageous for them. People changed. They changed in the other direction. They went from believing in a strict immigration policy to believing in no borders. Nick Fuentes started off, introduced to the conservative movement. If I remember correctly, Thomas Sowell was one of the people, but also Mark Levin. And it's funny, even Thomas Sowell, who was a great intellectual, no doubt about it, give him his credit. But he was one of those National Review guys. He's one of those National Review guys. I think, in fact, I'm going to bring it up here so you can see it. There's again, never forget, the National Review had a cover, which is kind of like their last hurrah against President Trump. And the cover just said, against Trump. I mean, that was the cover. Now, do I know if all these contributors, knew the nature of what was going to be on that, what was going to be on that cover? Maybe not. It would surprise me if they didn't, honestly. I would be surprised if they didn't know what was going to be on that cover. Here, I'm going to pull it. I got it pulled up for you. Okay, here we go. Never forget, this was February 15th, 2016, National Review against Trump, the editors. I mean, it doesn't get, they knew. They signed their name to this. This is they signed their name to this. They knew exactly what this was going to be, the editors. Glenn Beck. Yeah, you got all of them here. You got, William Crystal. You got Bill Crystal there. You got, you know, Edwin Meese the third. Never forget, Edwin Meese was the attorney general when Reagan was in office during the Iran-Contra scandal. And Mark Levin, it was Edwin Meese's chief of staff. I always tell people that story. They go, huh? How do you know that? Because I looked into the Iran-Contra scandal. It was quite interesting to me how good old Ollie North took the fall and everything kind of got brushed under the rug. And a lot of people, rightly so, still have huge questions about Iran-Contra. Not enough, in my opinion, but have huge questions, and there are huge conspiracy theories that never were really answered about, the way that drugs were moved in and out of this country, and then subsequently the war on drugs that preceded it against black people. And people say, you hear a lot of black people who aren't very politically, they don't have great political acumen, but there's always been a running theory in the black community, in black America, that said, we didn't invent crack. We didn't invent crack cocaine. How many black chemists do you know? I don't know many. There are some, don't get me wrong, but not many. Not many. Don't know many black chemists, especially street chemists. They're in the hearts of Watts, Los Angeles, or Harlem, New York City, or the South Side of Chicago, or St. Louis, or Kansas City, or wherever, Philadelphia, D.C., Minneapolis. Don't know many black chemists. And so a lot of people, ask that question. We didn't invent crack cocaine. It felt like crack and the entire drug wave of the 1970s and 80s was not organic. In my opinion, it wasn't. And the record shows us. Now there's argument, well, how much of the drug trade was being overseen by the what would later become the neoconservative security state. How much of it could be laid at their feet? We don't know. We never will know. Why? Because Attorney General Edwin Meese, with the help of his chief of staff, Mark Levin, never really seemed too interested in prosecuting that scandal. And sure, again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's completely possible that intelligence agencies have rogue elements that operate outside the scope of the president's knowledge or the executive branch's knowledge. We know that from General Milley and President Trump. There's a lot of things that go on that President Trump probably doesn't know about. Everything that happened underneath his watch can't be, directly traced to his, what I want to say, him being negligent or corrupt. That's ridiculous. We can just talk about it like that. I'm not saying Ronald Reagan knew what was going on with the Iran-Contra scandal. I'm saying it was greatly detrimental to the black community and to the brand of the Republican Party ex post facto for many metropolitan areas that now vote Democrat almost religiously. It was very impactful for the narrative about the Republican Party. And some of these people right here on this cover are the architects, and there they are. National Review, February 15th, 2016, against Trump. And his name's right there. I said that all to bring up the fact that Thomas Sowell, as intellectual as he was, he's right there. He's right there. And I enjoyed William Buckley. He's a smart guy. He did some great interviews, okay? He was a smart cookie. But the problem with this entire Republican establishment, and we're going to bring it to a close here. I got to quick out. I got to go speak this evening, up in outstate Minnesota. But the problem with this sort of highbrow country club Republican establishment is they think everything's an intellectual debate. And in a sense, that is the way that they are the greatest form of controlled opposition. They think everything is a debate. It's not a debate with these people. There's not a debate. I don't know. Bill Kristol's just coming out and endorsing Mamdani, so I don't even think he's interested in debating the communists anymore, which makes sense because there's a huge, sort of European, Fabian, communist, Trotskyite kind of element to that neoconservative cohort. But this isn't a debate anymore. These people want to kill us. They want to take away our freedoms. It's not alarmism. It's not sensationalism. It's not extremism. We're just observing what they actually say out of their mouth. They call us fascists. They call us Nazis. Hillary Clinton says we need to be re-educated like they're doing there in communist China, re-educating the Muslims. In China, they're re-educating the Muslims. Why? Because the Christians aren't radical enough, right? But here in America, they consider the Christians to be the radicals and the Muslims to be the victims. I mean, they just play these, what Alex Jones, famously calls the Hegelian dialectics, until the people are disinterested, disassociated, discouraged, distant from the truth. And it feels like we're very distant from the truth. Again, to go back to this, this Israel-Palestine deal. All of these guys, all of them tend to just kind of say there's a hard line around the country of Israel and any criticism for anybody in it. It's absolutely ridiculous to me. I don't even understand the premise. And I hear the Christian Zionist premise is, well, God said, and because God said wait a second. Hang on. Hold the fucking phone for a second, okay? Excuse my language. Hold the fucking phone. No man was created perfect, and therefore no nation is perfect. It's a very simple concept, a very simple Christian concept. Because all of mankind is fallen, subsequently, our nations share that fallen status as well, and that would include this country, America, and also Israel. So, for us to try and make this claim of religious righteousness, I'm not saying that there aren't righteous wars, that there aren't righteous times to fight, but the premise that we can't be critical of a government or its leaders based on that divine status, and we do believe that America has divine influence, that America's founding and our ideals were inspired by and influenced by divine thought, divine, the divine spirit. We do believe that. And you can make the same claim about Israel. But how many people here in America have been in charge, have been in positions of leadership that haven't lived up to that divine calling? If you're a Christian and you don't acknowledge that individuals all throughout history have failed to live up to their divine calling, you're not Christian. And that's why Brandon Tatum, Officer Tatum, is showing us just how ridiculous some of this Christian Zionist movement really is in its edifice. It's not. It's about just as intellectually inconsistent as some of the things on the left. No, all stolen land is illegitimate. No, it's not. Absolutely, it isn't, and we can say that with no equivocations. We're not going for it. You're not going to delegitimize America, through the proxy of delegitimizing Israel on the basis that no nation can stand on stolen land. We're not falling for it. Sorry, we're not sorry. We're not that stupid. We're not that gullible. Because if this isn't a legitimate nation, then why do all you Democrats want to be in charge of it? Just go for it. Just, do what you really want to do. Do what you really want to do. Throw the Constitution out. Throw the Bill of Rights out. Throw rights granted to us by a creator. Throw it all out, and just go to authoritarianism like they do in China. That's what you really want. That's that's the apple of your eye. That's what you really, that's your ambition. That's your real goal. Just go for it. Don't hit us with the democracy and this is not American. President Trump is defying our laws and our Constitution. You don't believe in the Constitution. Stop it. We're not buying it. But also, at the same time, you Christians need to stop even pretending it's obnoxious. It's obnoxiously dishonest to even pretend like we could make a claim any nation in world history is perfect. And if a nation isn't perfect, if individuals if humanity is fallen and its individual peoples aren't perfect, then they deserve criticism. This is a fundamental of Christian faith in the idea of sin itself. And in many of these Christian Zionist interpolation of the scripture, Israel can do no wrong. It's a ridiculous notion. And even furthermore, I think it's dangerous for Israel. I think it's so intellectually dishonest. All it does is undermine Israel. The same way, in some sense, it's kind of ironic, the same way when America made the claim that we were going to lead this adventure, let's call it, all around the world, democracy and freedom, making nations self-determining by peace through strength. We were going to go around and make everybody self-determining. We didn't make them self-determining. We made them dependent. We made them dependent on our police state, our protectionism. We made them dependent on our dollar. We made them dependent. We created the greatest global empire, the greatest global welfare empire in the history of human civilization. That's what America had become before President Trump came down the escalator. America was the greatest, the greatest welfare empire in the history of human civilization. Why? Why are we a reverse vassal empire? What's a vassal state? What's a reverse vassal state? For those who are new to the podcast, we talk technical, political, we talk brass tack. This is the reality. These are the fundamentals of foreign policy, of domestic policy, of American politics. A vassal empire is when a small kingdom pays tribute to a big kingdom for military protection. That's a vassal state. We have a reverse vassal empire in America. We pay everybody else to protect them. We give everybody else a little bit of money to protect them. We give them a little bit of money. They pay it back to us for the goods and services, sometimes military equipment, but also, we pay them a little bit to say, well, now we have to come protect our investment. We have to protect our interests. And like we did there in Afghanistan, we end up selling poppy all throughout the world, and we get an opioid crisis right here in America. And you mean to tell me that's by accident? You mean to tell me we went to Afghanistan and the poppy production was 3% when we showed up, it was 93% when we left, and we didn't take a cut? Of course we did. And that lie undermined the integrity of our nation and our involvement all around the world. And we have to pay a price. That price is not to let every Afghan citizen, every Afghani come live in America. That's not the price you have to pay. The price is to be honest, to confess one's sins and to repent. The answer is not suicide. And that's the difference. See, again, this Christian ethic, we could go right down to the basics. I challenge anybody. Let's debate about the Christian ethic. I challenge anybody. The Christian ethic, and the reason why the left and the progressives have such a problem with tempering their geopolitical, philosophy or worldview, is because they don't acknowledge the idea of sin, the fundamental idea of sin, and the need for repentance. And the temperance of repentance. It's not suicidal empathy. The repentance is not suicidal empathy. Even if you go back to the early, the inception of this country, and you say some Christian men or European settlers did some very, heinous things in those wars, in those early days of conquest. You could say that with good utility, absolutely. The answer, and ex post facto, isn't for American citizens to give up their citizenship or to kill themselves out of empathy. That's ridiculous. There's nothing remotely human about that. Again, there is no nation that is perfect because there are no people who are perfect. If a nation is imperfect, if a nation shares the same fallen status as our forebears, as Adam and Eve, if nations share the same fallen status as the rest of mankind and we are all fallen, if that is the case, if we believe that as Christians, then no nation is beyond criticism. No nation or its leaders are beyond criticism, are beyond questioning. No nation. No nation of the world. And I hear the people like Tatum and all the other Israel firsters say, well, all we hear about is Israel. I mean, Israel, Israel, Israel. Maybe from some people, not from me, not from most of your America firsters. Nobody worth their salt who's an America firster, spends all of their time talking about Israel. In fact, you could argue that the disproportional interest, the gravity towards Israel stems from the mainstream media and the establishment and the Israel lobby's defense, illogical defense of Israel, the illogical expectation around the narrative about Israel. That's where a lot of the gravity comes from. It's like a magician saying, look over here. I'm doing a trick, look over here. And he's holding the thing in his hand. It's like, dude, we can see it. Dude, what are you doing? Is this, we're looking at each other going, is this supposed to be a trick? Is this supposed to be a magic trick? Can you see the fucking ball in his hand? He's holding it. Dude, you're palming it, dude. We can see it. I mean, that's what the Israel narrative has become all around the world, and it's harmful to the Jewish people, and it's detrimental to the state of Israel. And you Christian Zionists this Republican Jewish coalition deal, and it's not even personal because they said I was anti-Semitic, which is crazy. I just spent about half of the time here discussing this, defending the legitimacy of Israel, but they call me anti-Semitic because I said what? Because a few Jewish elites ran the Fed? They did. Janet Yellen, Ben Bernanke, what? I can't say they're Jewish? Barack Obama's a black elite. He is. The NAACP is run by white liberals, but black elites, black bourgeois elites. So I can say there are black elites, and I can say that the black elites are sellouts, and I can circulate memes about Barack Obama, who wants us to vote for Kamala Harris because she's black, but he won't support Winsome Sears, even though she's black because she's a Republican. I can talk about the black identity all day long. But if I say Jewish at all of a sudden I'm a Jew hater, I'm anti-Semitic. Come on, guys. Who you think you're fooling? That's the other thing I want to ask Officer Tatum. Who do you think you're fooling? You're not fooling us. It's embarrassing. All you're doing is embarrassing yourself. Like Mark Levin is, he's embarrassing himself. And Norm Coleman standing up there, this was really, and I'm going to end on this. This really threw me for a loop. A lot of the pushback about my candidacy for U.S. Senate stems from what people call a troubling past. You had too much baggage. He's multiple children, 4 children by 3 women, which in my opinion is a blessing. It's funny how Elon Musk can have 14 children by 6 women. Nobody bats an eyelash. I guess if you're a billionaire, there's a different expectation, and hey, more power to you. But I saw something very interesting. Floyd Mayweather, and granted, I want to say this, I think Floyd Mayweather is a very underrated boxer. People criticize him all the time. Well, you didn't fight guys in his prime, blah, blah, blah. He just ran. And the art of boxing is hit and don't be hit. Bruce Lee would have loved a Floyd Mayweather because the art of superb defense in boxing and combat sports is not a small thing. In fact, it's one of the main things. So Floyd Mayweather is a very underrated boxer in public opinion, as I see it. Incredible boxer, incredible. I'll still go watch some Floyd Mayweather fights to this day. I love going to watch him fight Canelo the first time. He put on a masterclass against Canelo, and he was already in his late 30s. He's a masterful boxer. But 2 things can be true. Floyd Mayweather's not an exemplary citizen. And isn't it ironic that the Republican Jewish coalition would bring Floyd Money Mayweather to, get an honorary, I don't know what they called it, the Jewish Champ of the Year? I don't even know what they called it. Some award they gave him. and they put a religious Jewish garb on him, and there's Norm Coleman behind him. Minnesota former U.S. Senator Norm Coleman, chair of the Republican Jewish Coalition, standing right there behind Floyd Mayweather. And is Floyd Mayweather the type of representation that the Republican Jewish Coalition feels is exemplary? Been to prison, multiple charges. And I'm not saying all of them are legitimate. I'm not saying that he did whatever they said that he did, because I wasn't there, so I don't know. But their claim is that, and it's like, well, we can give you an award and we can honor you and we can let you represent us symbolically if you have all this baggage in your past. But if you want to run as a candidate, you can't have that baggage. We want to like kind of create two separate worlds. And that was their objection of President Trump. President Trump didn't fit the mold. He didn't fit the bill. He didn't fit the prototype. But the prototype was designed to deceive you. That's the entire point. And it shows, because you can't for 1 second get me to believe that their morals and their moral and ethical standards about who they're associated with change, who they give awards to, like a Floyd Mayweather, and then who they call anti-Semitic candidates like a Royce White. You can't, and even if you go on to say, well, it's advantageous because Floyd Mayweather's popular and he's very influential culturally. Even if you go on to use that excuse, that just means that they're sellouts. That just means that the morals and the ethics are malleable, that they'll bend the morals and the ethics based on their agenda, based on the desired goal. There's nothing remotely honest about that. So it just kind of blows my mind. And again, it's not an attack on Floyd Mayweather. People go through things. People have problems. People, have troubles in their life. People have addictions: sex, gambling, drugs, drinking, adrenaline, the internet, porn, whatever it is. People have their problems. I'm not, on a high horse here. I'm just saying it's kind of ironic, that the Republican Jewish Coalition felt that it was so necessary to declare that Royce White is an anti-Semite. Professor Penn is, more Jewish than Norm Coleman, if that's even a thing. He's more Jewish than Norm Coleman the same way I'm more black than Tim Scott. But, I don't mean to make it about identity, but some of these things are just ironic. Continue to watch. Let's, I want to continue to talk about them and unravel some of these things, untangle some of these things. I want to be a voice of reason. I think I am a voice of reason. I don't think anything I said tonight here was anti-Semitic. I don't think anything I've said is anti-Muslim. I don't trust Mamdani. I don't think people really care about the Palestinians. I think the Muslim world and a lot of these Muslim leaders and a lot of their religious leaders look at us as fools. And they look at the left in America as fools, and they think they can use the left for their own political power grab, like exactly what's happening there in New York City and right here in Minneapolis. I really do believe that. And I can reject that and still not need to accept Zionism. I can reject jihad and I can reject Zionism. I'm an American citizen. Anybody that makes the claim that America's destiny is inextricably linked to Israel's destiny is way out of line. Way out of line. And what's scary is if nobody else, at least our politicians shouldn't be of that thinking. And if they are, then we will never make this country great again. We never. As long as we are spread across the globe from here to the middle of Asia, the middle of Western Asia, and some, interlocutor sort of geopolitical philosophy and policy, as long as we're locked into that, we're going to have trouble maintaining our borders the same way that the Roman Empire did. If our empire has to continue to span from the first island chains right there in the Pacific, the first island chains in the Pacific, all the way to middle of Western Asia, Guys, we got to reel it the fuck in. Reel it in. Reel it in. Israel's a strong nation. And quite honestly, let's just put this shit on the table too. Uh a huge cohort of the people who are in power in Israel and live in Israel come from Europe. And again, I asked the question, why a nation who has 350 million people have to come to the defense of a continent with 500 million people against a little country with 80 million people. And there I'm talking about us defending the European Union against Russia. But another question could be asked, why does America have to come to the defense of Israel and Europe doesn't? Europe should be down there fighting those wars with Israel, with their Polish and Ukrainian and German, and they should be fighting that war with their brothers, Romanians and all the other Jewish ethnicities that are there in Israel. They all come from Europe. Why don't the European countries let them fund Israel? Let Europe fund Israel. Let some of these African nations, who we also pay money to, let some of these African nations send money to Israel on behalf of their, of their people. The Moroccans, the Ethiopians, all of these nations over there who have Jews who live in Israel. You fund Israel. The extensions of the nations where the ethnic heritage is of the Jewish people that live in Israel should fund Israel. Number one, the Europeans. Let them fund it. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. It just blows my mind that we're even, at this place where we can't even have a discussion about it. You can't. Tucker Carlson is a Jew hater? Really? Next, they're going to say Steve Bannon is. Really? Are you guys kidding me? And it's funny they call me a Jew hater. Ask any of the Jewish. Ask Laura Loomer about me. I talk to Laura Loomer all the time. Not all the time. We don't speak all the time, but I've talked to Laura Loomer on several occasions. Laura Loomer follows me on X. You won't even know the name Louis Topper. Love Louis Topper. He's a good dude. Good America First dude. Good America First Jew. He's America First, and he believes Israel's a strong nation. And in many ways, we're putting the restraints on Israel in his mind. And I tend to agree with that. I tend to agree that we want to be in the middle of it. We don't need to be in the middle of it. But Professor Penn and some of our other friends, and I went to Hopkins High School, and a lot of my young friends that are Jewish, and there's no hatred towards Jews. That is dishonest. For Brandon Tatum to make the claim that people criticize Israel because they hate Jews is dishonest. I'm not saying there aren't people who do criticize Israel because they genuinely hate Jews. I'm not saying that doesn't exist. But to make this claim that the rise of anti-Semitism is based on what we currently see as a valid critique, a valid criticism and questioning of our foreign policy is absolutely dishonest. It's been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio, powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. I'm in partnership with a Ukrainian Jew. I don't know. It's pretty anti-Semitic of me. We believe in the freedom of movement. And that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. The freedom of movement. Not just physically, although that is a goal, obviously. But it's not just physical. It's intellectual. It's spiritual. They want to imprison you. 3 levels: physically, mentally, and spiritually. And they're working on it. I mean, they're making inroads. And we find ourselves in these sort of, invisible intellectual prisons. And I say the development of the intellect is inextricably linked to the development of the spirit. You can't have one without the other. It's what makes us different than the animals. It's part of what God gave us. It's why the human spirit yearns for freedom and the truth, even though convenience feels so good. The human spirit longs for freedom and the truth, even though convenience can feel so good. That's part of the great design that our Lord and Savior, the one true living God, gave to us. The intellect is inextricably linked from the development of the spirit. Right now, they're trying to imprison you. And you have to have courage. I'm talking to you Christian Zionists. Honestly, we're going to lose this election. We're going to lose these midterms. We're going to lose in 2028 unless we galvanize a Christian nationalist movement that says, you know what? We got love for the Jews. We got love for Israel. We're going to make Europe pay for it. Remember how we're going to make Mexico pay for that wall? We're going to make Europe pay for that protection of Israel. Those are your people. Those are the people you all kicked out. Let's be honest. America, we didn't kick any Jews out of America. We welcomed the Jews to America. You kicked the Jews out of Europe. It's your problem. Your sin. You pay. The European Union should pay. But we got to think about America first. First and foremost, you got American Jews like Bill Kristol endorsing admitted communist Muslims in the world's financial capital, New York City, for the mayor's race tomorrow. You just can't make this shit up, people. It's been another episode. We appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. Tomorrow, we're going to be watching the election. I'm going to run an interview for you with the great Chris Martinson, which I think you'll enjoy as we watch the election. So get to it when you can. We may even postpone tomorrow's episode and just look at the election and watch election coverage. We may do something special around that because I do think it's such a pivotal moment. Although I'm pretty confident in the outcome of both elections, I do think Omar Fateh will be defeated by Jacob Frey, the liberal elite not willing to give over Minneapolis, one of the big Fortune 500 companies, to the Marxists, and communists, just right out in the open, like not just yet. More of a controlled demolition and destruction of the Twin Cities in Minneapolis than Omar Fateh is proposing. But I do believe that Mamdani may come out victorious, and what a terrible thing that would be for the country on so many levels. So we'll play tomorrow by ear, but either way, we'll be back on Wednesday evening, and we're going to get the great Professor Penn in this week as well. He's got a lot of information for us from within the Republican Party, and we got some other great guests lined up. The great Chris Martinson in the next day or so, which was a great interview, and we got some more people coming up. So we appreciate your viewership and listenership. We hope that you like the daily schedule that we've gone to. And last week I had to let the interview with Mama White breathe. If you didn't get a chance, please go back, watch the interview with me and my beautiful mother, Rebecca White. And we get into it from time to time. There's a rocky history there, but she just did a great job of laying out how things have changed in Minnesota, and the sharp decline that we see right here at home in the belly of the beast. So that's it for me. God bless you. Godspeed. God bless America. I hope the people in New York City think better of what's to become of New York City tomorrow evening. But we'll see how that all plays out. Big voter day turnout, big game day turnout. We know that in elections in general, and we'll see how that tends to swing. Usually, your progressive and your leftists have big game day turnout. Cautionary tale for us and the rest of the MAGA movement. But we'll see how everything plays out tomorrow. That's it for me. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Everything's up on the bar. We're all in. We get to decide. Do you want to live on your knees, or do you want to die on your feet fighting? That's the decision you get to make now.